Any day that you are sued in federal court is just not a good day. Earlier today, I received a phone call from a fellow who I'm going to call David. That is not his real name. That's just how I'm going to identify him for purposes of this video. And after he introduced himself and told me how he found me, he said, I just today have been served notice that we are being sued in federal court for non-compliance to ADA website regulations. Any day that you are sued in federal court is just not a good day. Poor man. So we spent a couple of hours. We were able to engage his lawyer and the developer for his website. And one of the things that kept jumping out at me as we were talking through the first little bit of our time together, he said, I had no idea about this. Why didn't anyone tell me? I wish more people were talking about this. And he actually encouraged me to make a video about this. And the longer I got into thinking about this, the more I realized I wanted to break it up into digestible pieces. So the goal of this video series is to break down very clearly what ADA website compliance is, who it applies to, what you can do to make sure your site is compliant, and what to do if you get sued. Okay, so what is ADA as it applies to websites? Let's start at the very beginning. The ADA website compliance is part of the Americans with Disabilities Act, specifically Section 508, right? And if you're in the business side of things, I wouldn't necessarily worry about understanding all of the intricacies of that. That's more of a technical function. But the Web Accessibility Content Guidelines 2.0 are what is covered in Section 508 of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And in a nutshell, this is what it says. It says that your website is a place of public space. It is a public space, the same as a brick and mortar location. And as a business, it has to be accessible to folks with disabilities, right? So it is the same as having a wheelchair ramp that allows folks into your business. If your website is not accessible to folks with disability, you are denying them entry. Now, what does accessible mean? There's tons, the guidelines are huge, right? And again, that's more of a technical piece. And like I said, I'm gonna try to keep this high level, so not a lot of technical details, but it applies to things like the ability for screen readers to access it, the ability to adjust the resolution and the contrast for people with visual disabilities, right? It allows everyone, regardless of ability level, to see your website and interact with it in the way that you intended when you designed it. So the overall result of ADA compliance is actually a really good thing. It's going to open your business up to a ton of customers that it's currently inaccessible to, right? Because they can't use it. So that in a nutshell is what ADA compliance is. We want to get the same level of accessibility across the board so that every customer who wants to come to your website has the ability to come there, use it, and have a similar user experience. Okay, so are there industries that are more likely to be targeted for ADA compliance lawsuits? Yes, this is very true. The industries that are most likely to be targeted are hospitality, so things like hotels, resorts, as well as food and beverage, live events, any kind of ticketing system that you might have, e-commerce, basically anywhere where the sole purpose of your website is to allow customers to complete an action, right? And so there's a lot of misinformation out there. I see lots of comments that say, oh, this only applies to government websites. That is absolutely not true. And I'll put some resources below so that you can actually see which businesses and which industries it applies to. Basically, it applies to everyone. And like every other form of compliance, just like your PCI compliance so that you can take credit card transactions, and just like your GDPR compliance so that you can collect data on people in the European Union, it is best to assume that this compliance requirement applies to you so you can work towards it. Even if it's something that right now can't be made a priority. For instance, this poor man who is now dealing with having to, in the middle of a pandemic, go to tell his bosses, which are basically the owners of these companies, in addition to revenue is being down, right? We have much less business than we had pre-COVID. Now we have to deal with this massive collection of fines and fees and lawyers' fees and all the stuff we have to deal with when if we had known, we could have prevented it. As I mentioned, this is part of a multi-part series to demystify ADA compliance. So if you would like to see the next video in this series, be sure to click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to be notified as soon as it's released. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next time.